can work on boards. This is a cradle board. You can work on boards, you can work on canvas. You can, although if you're somebody who likes to scratch and dig into stuff, boards are best. It doesn't have to be a cradle board. I also just paint on boards. So if you like to do a lot of gouging and stuff, I typically don't, but I don't just because I'm not used to it. So I'm kind of want to encourage myself to dig a little bit. And that's why I want us to start off building up layers so we have something to dig into. You can use watercolor paper, which, as we know, if you do watercolor paper and you turn out with something you like, you can back it on a board, and you can also enter it in a watercolor show because it's on watercolor paper, even if it's acrylic and abstract and not watercolory. So that's something really important to think about. So anyway, so just so you know, this is a cradle board. I put 2 coats of gesso on, and I just think that's when you're working on raw wood, it's better to put a couple coats of gesso because you never know. It will seal out the tannins in the wood. You don't want that coming through onto your painting. So that's where we're at with surfaces. So whatever you want to work on is fine. Okay, if you want to work on, experiment, work on cardboard or work on a different surface, that's fine too. It's whatever you want to make. Now, as far as papers, we are going to start out this piece with just covering our canvas with neutral papers. It's just going to all be neutral, okay? So that's what we're going to start out with, and I'm going to use these on here, and then I want to cover a couple other things, just so you know where we're going. So we're going to start by putting all of our neutral papers on, and don't really care how perfect or how they're laid out, because you're going to cover them up. And this is all about creating layers, because some of it down there you may not want to cover up. You want to keep some of it peeking through. Once we've got that done, then we can come back and add printed things. Like this is a really great piece of fabric that I've been hanging on to for quite a while now. We've got our jelly print papers. This might be the colors that I'm working on. I just bought these 2 pieces of wallpaper from a little gal on Etsy, and I'm really liking a lot taking flowers from wallpaper and adding those into my painting. I could easily paint this flower, but adding it in with paper and working around it puts a different take on the painting. So when you're out there, think about things that you can. This is going to be your second. After we're done with the neutrals, then we're going to go back and start adding our composition in. So that's another thing to think about as you're planning your piece out. So I'm kind of giving you a layout of it now, so you can be thinking about it. I mean, these are really great. It's always nice to have a little bit of black and white in your painting. So those are all things you can be planning on. Now, along with those, and I'm hoping you can kind of see most of this stuff I'm laying down here. I have to leave little notes to myself so I remember what goes first. You can make your own papers. This is just paint scratched on and marks made into it, but that could be a fun little thing to add in. I always have little papers that I run on the computer. I do the same thing over and over again, because this is kind of cool. When I just need something black and white, I've already got it printed out, and it's mine. It's my own hand. I do pages of writing and just make copies of it, because that can go into a piece. And a lot of this stuff is not new news to you because we've covered it before in class. But this was just squirting black paint on a page that I was cleaning my brayer off on. You don't want to throw that stuff away. because that black mark is going to show up and be really cool somewhere when I get around to it. Then, you know, there's jelly plate. You can do so many crazy things. It's usually the leftover junky stuff that I use the most. I'll make things like this and never use them because they're a little bit too dramatic. But these little scruffy pages, I always make room for those. And that's all jelly plate. This is just a piece of watercolor paper that I wrote on and then smeared paint all over it and rubbed it out. But it could be a really nice piece of paper to add in somewhere. And that's what I'm always looking for is, you know, I like to add papers in. I already know how to paint, but finding a composition by adding different elements in is pretty fun. These are pieces, we did these before in class once before. It's plaster on a cloth, just a piece of burlap or a piece of muslin. And then, and as is this is just a piece of muslin that I actually did the plaster over a stencil, laid the stencil, scraped on some plaster. So now I've got this really cool piece of cloth that is so dimensional. I'm pretty sure I am going to use this in whatever I'm working on here. It looks pretty cool, and it was so easy to do. It's literally taking a piece of fabric, any kind of fabric. It could even be a piece of printed fabric if you wanted. And you just can take, I think I even use joint compound. Just trowel it on and let it dry, and then you can just take your fabric and kind of bend it. You can even take it and kind of crumble it, and all of that gets really cracked, nice cracks on it. Then I put a clear coat of medium over it to seal that in because the joint compound is really porous. And then you can just rub colors on. And the colors are really dark over here where they connected, you know, they soaked into the actual fabric that was left exposed. But these are such nice pieces to add. I mean, I've used these so many times where I've actually cut them, and this has become the vase in my piece. So that's a fun thing to think about. This is an old painting that I think it was a couple different paintings, but I needed the frame, so I ripped this off. But I remember it had some cool stuff happening in it, so I'm going to save this and cut it up and use that. And then easy things to do, and you know what? When we pull out our jelly plate or we pull out something to make papers, we always want those papers to look really great, and they don't really need to. They can look just like, you just want the color, you want the texture of it. This is just scrubbing paint on here and then running something through it. I don't want this to look like anything, but I can, you know, rip this and make some really cool element. You know, maybe if I'm really, really careful about it. Let's be careful about it for a minute. See what that looks like. This piece is not ripping as well. But something like that, just laid over, could be pretty nice. And that just might be, you know, this piece of ripped up paper might just be the thing in the painting that gets your attention. So, so keep that in mind. It's, you know, I always have paper laying around to clean off my palette, to clean off my brushes. And oftentimes those are just the colors that I need, especially if it's a painting you're already working on and you've got all those colors. Rub them on a piece of paper so you can tear them up and add them into your painting because they already match your color palette. And this is just packing paper from Home Depot. You can buy that big box. It's like $8 or $10 that has all this packing paper in it. It's really nice to work on. And this is just another painting. I mean, an exercise of some kind that I did, but there's some really fun things in here that I can just rip out and use. So, all that being said is, you know, save everything. Don't ever throw anything away. You can all be paper hoarders too. I also have a box that, these are all important papers. These are all the special, I don't know if you can see the little things I'm pulling out. And I'm just giving you ideas of how to make it, you know, a little bit more workable in your studio. Somebody sent me this. It's so pretty, but it's gonna end up in a piece of my art somewhere. So these are all like the little specialty things. I have all my cyanotype papers here, things that'll be more of a detail piece. So if you can get those all separated out, once you do it, it's done, and you can just flip through things and find what you want. And I'm all about finding ways to make my painting process easier, because I don't want to have to spend more time thinking about where things are than I do of actually creating my piece. I also keep a drawer full of little things where I see words that I like, and I keep those in, you know, this is all separated out, so I kind of know what's here. And because I've gone through the exercise of separating them, I'll be working on something, it's like, I know I've got that thing in that drawer, so it's easier for me to find. So I suggest that. And the last thing, for those of you who are wanting to add in, you know, assemblage pieces, we all have junk drawers. They are the best resource. Junk drawers and your tool, if you have a tool room, a tool bench, your husband has one, go take stuff off of it, because I find the best stuff. I mean, I love this. And I took this whole camera apart just to get that face, but I haven't used it yet. So this is not my only one. I have more from my assemblage days, but I think what I'm going to use in this piece is a couple of these little guys. And I'll probably sand them up and just add color onto them. I'm not really sure, but I'm just showing you this for those of you who are wanting to add in dimension. Be thinking about that, and really helpful for you if you can kind of pull together, you know, elements, like you're designing a room. You pull together your fabric samples, your drapes, your tile, pull all your stuff together and kind of get a feel of how that's going to go onto your piece. I got to show you something really cool that I just picked up from another artist. You know, we've always used the matte medium to lay our stuff down. So this bottle of, I think this is 28 bucks for this 12-ounce bottle of that. This gal was teaching it, and she was using Varathane. This is water-based. Does this look familiar to anybody? Okay. It's water-based polyacrylic, and it's for furniture, floors, you know, hardware, you know, that kind of stuff. Oh my God, this stuff is so great to use for your medium, because you're using it for your medium and to cover everything, and it really, it's just so, and this is only 18 bucks a can. And if you buy it in the Varathane, if you buy it in the green label, the exterior, it has a UV protectant in it. So I'm going to use this because I'm really liking it. Now, one thing I do believe is going to happen with it is it dries really hard. So that's really beautiful when you're painting a tabletop and a floor, but it dries really hard, so I'm not sure how great it is for when, you know how we'll take the hand sanitizer or alcohol to rub paint out? I'm not sure how good this is going to let you rub paint out because it's so strong. It's just kind of fun just to, on a clean canvas, just to get something going on. To write something, and I'm writing what I'm saying because I can't think of something else while I'm talking. On your board, like, set your intention. However you want to write it. If you want to print it, you want to write it, you don't want it to be legible, you can just scribble it. But it's always fun when you can add in some writing. Now, you're not going to believe when I tell you this. If you don't get every little wrinkle out, don't worry about it. Now, I kind of like, I have the bubbles out, but I have creases here. And sometimes you want those creases because you can come back over and sand and get some really cool textures when you sand over those creases. You can't if you have bubbles, so you really don't want to have bubbles. Because if it's not, general rule is you want to make sure that your papers are all touching the surface. And when you have bubbles, that means that part of the paper is not touching the surface. These were coffee stained papers that we did one time in class. And this one has a doily printed on it. So you see what that Stabilo pencil would do to this? Same thing as what this is doing. It's going to turn everything gray, but that's okay, I don't mind. Sometimes these old ledgers are really nice because the ink that's on them, I find, will bleed, and it's, see, it's that really pretty, it makes that green ink really vibrant. So I'm just kind of digging around and slapping this stuff on. I don't want that whole thing. See how that the medium turned that blue color? That's kind of fun. Favorite thing of all time is the dressmaker patterns. They lay down really nice. And they leave you some nice little marks. Now this guy up here is starting to bubble. So remember, you always have to go back and check your papers and make sure they're not bubbling behind you. That guy doesn't want to stay down. Sometimes you can pull them back up, but even if it rips when you pull them back up, it doesn't matter. This is just your first layer. Don't get married to it. Come on. Look how cool that is when I pulled it up. It left the imprint of the ledger on my board. That's a good little piece of information to know that it does that, in case I ever want it to do that. So I'm not sure I can get this bubble out. So when I come back, when this is all dry, I can sand this and smooth that out because I don't want the variation in the surface, and it'll make a nice little texture. These little scrapers, for those of you who have these, you know how great they lay things down. For those that don't have it, you're probably going to want one. And it's just a silicone bowl scraper from Amazon in the cooking section. And it has a really nice little beveled edge right here that's soft and flexible, and it really helps lay the papers down. I saw one person using a brayer to lay their papers down. It just didn't work as well, I didn't think. Kind of like that stuff happening right there. I might leave that. So you can see this is all just pretty neutral. I got a big, huge bubble that's happening right here. So for those, if you don't know how to fix those big bubbles when they show up and you can't sand them out, or you don't want to lose that, you can wait until it's completely dry. Take a little X-Acto knife, make a slice, and get your brush and shove your medium down back in that slice and smooth it down, and you won't even be able to tell there's a cut there. Nice. I don't always completely cover my sides. I like it to look more like Not so much that I painted all the way around. Pieces of the painting can hang off the sides, but it to me looks more painterly just to not just to let that organically happen with whatever you're working on. I mean, I want to use that. That's got too much color in it. Now, don't forget, there are some pretty cool other things that you can put in, like fabric. Like, let's put a piece of fabric in here. It might take a little bit more of the medium to get the fabric to lay down. Here's a tag. This looks like it was from earrings. So I'm going to throw that in there because that'll be a fun little texture for something. I hope. I hope it works. Here's a little card, a little, oh, let's do always. A little flash card that was from something. That might work. This is, don't be afraid to get your fingers in there and work stuff down. This is a cool little tag from some piece of clothing. That's gonna work somehow. And you know what? I don't know how they're gonna work. And, but it's there. I'll figure out something and it'll give me a puzzle to figure out as I'm going along. There's a number, stick that in there. Here's something with a splash, and I think that is the recipe for making chalk paint that I jotted down. So, you know, anything you can find, just put it on there. Nothing is, I've actually had people come to class and say, I didn't have any papers to bring. It's like, wait, you got a trash can, don't you? You know, you can get so many great, this is called the Good Catholic Girl. I might want to save that. So this isn't the one I was working on. This is the one I was doing for you. You're pretty much the same. This isn't completely dry, so I don't want to hit it with sandpaper. But at this point, when you're all dry, you can, I don't have, it's funny that bubbles that you see, when everything's dry, sometimes they just disappear. But I like to go over, this is a good point, to just go over and knock everything down. I'm using sandpaper. I'm using 150 grit sandpaper. And who was it that asked me about the being able to paint over this? So now I'm hitting it with sandpaper, so I'm roughing up that surface, and I easily is going to take any paint I put on it. But I can sand out all these little bubbles that I don't want. This is so dry. I did this yesterday. The paper's pretty on there, so I'm not really pulling any paper up. Okay. The paper that you will pull up is paper that's not adhered down well anyway, so you kind of want to get rid of that. So this is also, let me see, what should I show you first? Let me show you this first. I have a bunch of just neutral kind of paints out here, and I do like this light green, but I think I'm gonna go, this is just the unbleached titanium. And I am going to just use my fingers on this. Let's hope it squirts out. Wait a minute. Oh, there we go. Way too much. But I'm just gonna kind of go around. You can go to some spots and just kind of smooth some stuff out. And kind of like blend it in a little bit more. Will help kill some of those edges that I had going, so I don't have some real, I don't want to have really defined lines all over. And it just kind of unifies everything a little bit more, so it's not so patchworky, which nothing wrong with that, but it just gives you a little bit more, a little less to fight against when you start putting your next layers down. And yes, you could be doing this with a brush if you didn't want to use your fingers. I do like using a brush to kind of smooth things out and blend it in a little bit more. But I'm feeling at this point where I can kind of start turning this and deciding I'm probably going to do a floral. And I like the way this looks because that could actually be a flower. This could actually be a vase. So this might be a good time for me to add, since I know kind of what I'm doing, or I have a general idea of where I think this might go, I'm going to add some texture down. If I can ever find the end to these things. Ah, there it is. I might just add a couple pieces in here. Because most of the time I forget to do this and I get almost done with the painting and I think, oh, I wish I'd added some texture in. Just the drywall web tape. And I also love, I know we've used this before and I thought I had Oh, here's a smaller one. This is the plaster wrap, the plaster cloth. And I do really like this. It's very messy because all that plaster is going to come off. But it leaves a nice texture that I like. It's kind of hard to rip it. Yeah, it's not going to rip. So I end up having more of a straight line. But I just take that and dip it right in water. You're not seeing that part, but trust me, I'm dipping it in water. And then maybe I'll put it right here. Now I just want to tap it down because I want the texture to show. But if I were to rub it, it will soften out all those, the plaster kind of rubs in and it takes the texture away. But that might be kind of a nice, the basis of my horizon line of my tabletop, if that's what this ends up being. So now is a good time to, that doesn't mean that what we do next, you know, after this, you can't add texture in then. But right now is a good time to do it because I can go over it with that paint. And let some of that texture get in there. And these paints, these little student brand paints really aren't the best paints to use, but they're great for the beginning process of your piece. They just don't have as much pigment, and they don't last as long as the quality paints, the professional paints, whichever brand you want to use. Let me see my wipes. So those are just a couple other things you can add in at this point. And as I'm going, it's like I'm falling in love with stuff that I don't want to cover up, which is never a good thing. Like I really like the numbers in here, but I know I'm going to get rid of a lot of this, but we'll see what happens. So do you see how that just kind of softened it out a little bit? As in comparison to this, which pretty much has all the same papers on it as that one does. And I also did, a couple of sheets of watercolor paper with those on it. Oh, I know, I want to show you something else. And so these are going to be, you know, even though it's going this way, I'm going to do some little paintings on these. So when you're laying all that stuff down, it's kind of fun to have, you know, do a bunch of them. So this was, I kind of like this. Sounds like I kind of like everything. A little bit of water. And then I'm using the transparent inks. This one I think is burnt raw umber. Oh, burnt umber. And I'm just going to drop a little bit into the water. I don't want it that dark. Oops. These guys are the they're the Liquitex inks. Let's see. You know how I always tell as I smell them? Yeah, I think they are. It doesn't really say what it is. It just says acrylic ink. Yes, it does say it. These are acrylic inks. And you know, you can, let's see if this will work. I love it when it looks like you set your coffee down. You know, I mean, this is where you can kind of play and have fun and make stuff happen that if it doesn't work out right, that's okay. You're going to cover it up anyway. But you might come up with something you really like and then you don't cover it up. So, there you go on that. Anything else I can add to this? I mean, I'm sure that there is, but I don't want to get too carried away on this layer because it'll stop us in the layers to come. These were just 4 little pieces that I did, but you see the relief stencil in there? I did a little bit of relief stencil in all of them in little bits and pieces. This had a squiggly, this was a checkerboard. I used joint compound. And this was a little floral. So I did those underneath everything so I could sand through to them. You could do that on this portion of the painting if you wanted. But again, anything textured you're going to do here is going to be there. You're not going to be able to fight it later on. Okay, so this is the wallboard joint compound from Home Depot. And I'm just going to use a little spatula. So I'm going to end up putting a lot of stuff on here that I may later go, what the heck were you thinking? And maybe squares is not the best thing, but And I'm not even going to worry about completely filling in the squares because I'd like it to look a little bit more irregular. Let's see what that does. That'll be a kind of a fun little texture. And I might want to repeat a little bit of it down here.